Okay, I'm ready anytime. Listen, thank you so much for saving my hide here. All right. And we're back. Oh, it's a beautiful world of technology that old junk shop does not understand. Oh dear, 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 dear. All right. I tell you, oh, I know what I have to do. I have to pull up my second screen here so that I can see ye olde chat. Give me 1 second. There it is. There we go. All right. Everybody's here. Hallelujah. We seem to have retrieved everyone. Oh, yes. Joan, good point. Linda, he will have to switch over and join the new. He'll have to join this stream particularly. Mama Atheist says, my guy is the best. Yes. Yes, he really, really is. All right. Looks like everybody has found us here except for Maya and Amiga Nuts. And Amiga Nuts is here. All right. And Maya will find us soon enough, I hope. Hopefully everybody's got their notifications on. Did you just see how I did that? How smooth was that? All righty. Well, for anybody watching this in the future, welcome to the one and the only Junk Shop Library channel, where we read and blaspheme the King James Version of 1611. A, because it deserves it, and B, because it's in the public fucking domain. Which sentence leads me into my next point. This channel is absolutely, positively, absolutely, and positively under no circumstances whatsoever for children. That is only partially due to the sweariness of your host. It's mostly because of the absolutely terrifying, horrifying, and just generally all-round gross and misogynistic nature of the source material. Because the Bible itself is not child-friendly. For those of you who were not brought up with this cursed book, that may come as a bit of a surprise, given how it's represented in the culture at large. For those of us who were brought up with this cursed book, probably doesn't come as much of a surprise to you at all, because you were raised with the gore and the grue, rocks through heads, spikes through heads, and heads in baskets, which is where we left off when my computer decided to be a little bitch. But here we are once again, thanks to the capable and, more to the point, lovely and accommodating and volunteering Mr. Manda himself, the one and only MathPig. So, Ahab had 70 sons. Amiga Nut says he just followed Linda. You were not following Linda? Or is it just one of those stupid things where YouTube decides to tell you you're not following somebody? If it was the latter, we've all been there. It was the former. All righty. Let us see. Sorry, I'm having to scroll back a little bit. He has been retrieved. Mama Atheist says, I always get my YouTube notifications half an hour after the stream starts. Well, you're riding pretty high on the average, Miss Amanda. I usually get mine the next day or sometimes the day after. Morton's here too. Welcome, Morton. Good to see you. All right. And that's me all caught up. I'm trying to find me a good balance between being able to see the chat and still being in the screen, and also having a place to put my coffee, which is vital. Absolutely fucking vital. All right. So, Mr. Jehu, having recently staged himself a good old-fashioned coup, a divinely sanctioned coup, but a coup nonetheless. That's just a lot more fun to say than you think it's going to be. Coup. Having staged himself a divinely sanctioned coup and gotten rid not only of Ahab and Jezebel, but of what's-his-face and what's-his-name, the second in command and the other king, is now in a position to rule over Israel and Judah, presenting the option of a united kingdom for the first time in several generations. Jeroboam. That's the other fucker's name, Jeroboam. I'm going to take these off since I'm not actively talking to Mr. MathPig, and since it's making, they've got really good cushioning, and it's making my voice come through my head all muffled and shit. MathPig, if I fuck anything up, just let me know in the private chat, and I'll make sure that I'm tabbed over to that. Yes, there we go. All right. All right. So, hello, Fire. Thank you for joining us. So, having done away with Ahab and Jezebel, Jeroboam, and what's his name, the captain of Jeroboam's host. Not important. Not going to go back to look it up. Mr. Jehu recalls to himself and says to himself, "Self," says he, "rememberest thou that Ahab had 70 sons, 70 sons?" Sorry, I had to do Old Testament math in my head there for a second. Not old junk shop's strongest suit. And so he sends throughout the lands to those that had raised Ahab's sons, by which we are given to understand that these sons were not exactly of war-fighting age, which makes this upcoming war crime even more a little bit gross than it was going to be anyway. And says, I think you should figure out amongst yourselves who should take Mr. Ahab's place and rule over Israel. And the elders of the land confer among each other and say, you know, this Mr. Jehu seems pretty bound and determined to rule over Israel himself. For after all, the last 2 kings that he hath encountered, he hath smoked with the sword. So they send a messenger or a fucking carrier pigeon or whatever back to Mr. Jehu and say, we are disinclined to raise up a king in opposition to thee, O great warlord with a host. Why dost thou not do that as seems pleasing to thee? So Mr. Jehu does that which seems pleasing to him. He orders the attenders and staff and what have you of Mr. Ahab's 70 sons to chop off their heads and send them to him as proof of their loyalty. And so they do. And they gather together all of the various heads of Ahab's variously aged sons and divide them into 2 wicker baskets, presumably of 35 each if the baskets are of equal size. But with this fucking book, you never know. Although I think if they were of different sizes, the book would have gone into the sufficient level of detail to make sure that we knew that, since apparently there's no fucking detail too small, going all the way back to the dawn of time. So they decapitate Ahab's 70 sons and divide the heads amongst 2 giant wicker baskets and send them to Mr. Jehu. And when word comes to Mr. Jehu that he has a speedy delivery, he tells Mr. McFeely to open up his parcel for him and dump the contents out in 2 giant piles at the entering in of the city and leave them out there overnight. And when morning comes, he gathers the people together and says, "See what I have done. I rule Israel now. Any questions?" Yeah, talking about the names in the chat. Julie says, "I see why we have so many folks named John, Paul, James, Seth, instead of, Jeroboam and Jehoshaphat and Zerubbabel." Yeah, if you ever get tired of your name and wish your parents had named you something else, just be thankful to whatever God may be that they didn't name your ass Zerubbabel. So the next thing Mr. Jehu does is a little less brazen. He does this next thing, as the King James says, subtly, which, as we all know by now, is King James for creepsy and tricksy. He says he sends word throughout the town. You remember how old King Ahab fell into the habit of giving offerings to Baal? Well, I'm going to do the same thing. But I'm going to put him to shame. I'm going to offer the biggest fucking sacrifice the land has ever heard of. To Baal. Of course, to Baal. It's going to be a big-ass blood sacrifice. So he gathers together the priests of Baal, and he sends throughout the land for all the men of Baal, and he crams them all into the house of Baal. He says, now I want you to sacrifice to Baal, and I'm going to do the same ass thing. Shades of Naaman here, right? Remember that weird bit of the story of Naaman where the only thing he asks of the Lord is that he not be smitten when he bows down before the false god of his king, because he doesn't want to get all smoked by his king neither, nor by Yahweh. Well, when he has done, and the text kind of glosses over this, which is why I'm spending a little extra time on it. When Jehu has done making the offering to Baal, which is the extent to which he is willing to be subtle about this whole charade, is that he's willing to not just go through the motions of gathering everybody together, but to actually do a Baal sacrifice himself. He then skips slightly out of the temple and says to the 80 men he had previously stationed around the temple, if any motherfucker in here gets out alive, the person who lets him out alive is gonna die in his place. I want this to be a total 100% Yahweh-worthy slaughter. And he sends them in. and they massacre the shit out of them. And then they break down the images of Baal. And they tear down the house of Baal. And they make it into a pub. Yes. Yes, you did indeed. You did indeed hear that correctly. They tear down the house of Baal, and on its site, they rear a pub. Which I did not see coming. I was expecting dead men's bones burnt on the altar, or the ground sown with salt, or a temple to Yahweh raised on the ground, or almost anything else, but not, we're gonna build a pub. Weird fucking book. Let me check in on the chat, see what's been going on. Joan points out that it seems that lying for Jesus / God is an old phenomenon. Yes, apparently so. What did Baal ever do to Yahweh? Well, exist. That's what he done did. Yahweh would not be this put out about somebody who wasn't actually encamped against him. Oh, Joan said it out loud while looking in the text. Yes, this is what I love about Joan, is the following along with the improv Bible study, sometimes in multiple translations. I don't know how you do that, my friend, but it just tickles me absolutely pink that you do. Pug? No, pub. Sorry, pub. Julie says, all churches should become pubs. Now! I am all for this change. Megan Nutt says, you know it's a who has the biggest contest, and Baal lost. Paul used to go to an old church that was turned into a pub. It had the old church stuff still in, altar and all. That's fucking amazing. When we were in Edinburgh in fucking November, it was cold as shit. It was 2 degrees Celsius when we landed. I was unprepared for the wind. Anyway, when we were in Edinburgh in November, there was an old church, a grand and glorious old church on the high street that had been turned into a museum / restaurant / pub. We just flat ran out of time, and plus it was cold, and they had a very nice patio, but it was not patio sitting there upon weather. Is there a tradition of that over there? And by over there, I mean like in the old countries across the Atlantic. Yes, Atlantic. Sorry, had to reach back into my memory banks there. Sorry, is that a tradition in Europe and environs of decommissioned churches being turned into pubs and art galleries and such? Because that would be fantastic if it was. Here we just knock them down and put the Walgreens. Joan says, or a hotel. Oh, that's amazing. I love it. I did not anticipate getting this much blasphemous glee out of a chapter that included the decapitation of 70 children. Although I got to admit, having an excuse to name a stream 70 heads in a duffel bag was pretty fucking fantastic. Sometime, someday, on a non-Bible stream, I will tell you the story that involves 7 heads in a duffel bag, the Joe Pesci movie. It's a legend around our house, part of the lore. Like I said, on some other day, some other stream. Means you gotta come back. Paul says, my old regiment's museum is a church. Some churches have been turned into pubs, and also old banks. Oh, that's awesome. I just love the idea of hashtag empty the pews, and then you just knock out every other pew and put a little cabaret table in front of it. Have burlesque shows up where the altar used to be. I could run one of those. All right. I think that's enough time on chapter 10. Full of glee, though it hath made me. We will roll on into chapter 11. See what in the hell happens in chapter 11. It's going to be hard to top chapter 10. God damn. And when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, holy shit, it's a woman with a name. Let me try that again. And when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed royal. Jesus Christ. Well, I said this chapter was going to have to do some work to top chapter 10, but hello, right out of the gate, Miss Athaliah. But Jehoshaphat, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took 2 women with names. Took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons which were slain, and they hid him, even him and his nurse, in the bedchamber from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. And he was with her hid in the house of the Lord 6 years, and Athaliah did reign over the land. And the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and fetched the rulers over hundreds, the captains and the guard, and brought them to him into the house of the Lord, and made a covenant with them, and took an oath of them in the house of the Lord, and shewed them the king's son. And he commanded them, saying, This is the thing that ye shall do. 1/3 part of you that enter in on the Sabbath shall even be keepers of the watch of the king's house. And 1/3 part shall be at the gate of Sur, and 1/3 part at the gate beyond the guard. So shall ye keep the watch of the house, that it not be broken down. And 2 parts of all you that go forth on the Sabbath, even they shall keep the watch of the house of the Lord about the king. And ye shall compass the king round about, every man with his weapons in his hand. And he that cometh within the ranges, let him be slain. And be ye with the king as he goeth out and as he cometh in. And the captains of the hundreds did according to all things that Jehoiada the priest commanded. They took every man his men that were to come in on the Sabbath, with them that should go out on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. And to the captains over hundreds did the priest give King David spears and shields that were in the temple of the Lord. And the guards stood, every man with his weapons in his hand, round about the king, from the right corner of the temple to the left corner of the temple, along by the altar and the temple. He brought forth the king's son, and put the crown upon him, and gave him the testimony. And they made him king, and anointed him. And they clapped their hands, and said, God save the king. And when Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she came to the people into the temple of the Lord. And when she looked, behold, the king stood by a pillar, as the manner was, and the princes and the trumpeters by the king. And all the people of the land rejoiced, and blew with trumpets. And Athaliah rent her clothes, and cried, Treason! Treason! But Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of the hundreds, the officers of the host, and said unto them, Have her forth without the ranges, and him that followeth her kill with the sword. For the priest had said, Let her not be slain in the house of the Lord. And they laid hands on her, and she went by the way by which the horses came into the king's house, and there was she slain. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people, between the king also and the people. And all the people of the land went into the house of Baal, and brake down his altars and his images brake they in pieces thoroughly, and slew Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priest appointed officers over the house of the Lord. And he took the rulers over hundreds, and the captains, and the guard, and all the people of the land, and they brought down the king from the house of the Lord, and came by the way of the gate of the guard to the king's house. And he sat on the throne of the kings. And all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was in quiet. And they slew Athaliah with the sword beside the king's house. 7 years old was Jehoash when he began to reign. And there we have the 11th chapter of the second book of the Kings. Alrighty. Had this been a trivia question with a gun to my head, I could not have told you, even granted the rest of the story, I could not have told you the name of the woman who reigned over Israel 7 years. Back in my Sunday school and churching days, they mysteriously seem to have sort of left that part out. And this was in the 1980s and 90s, y'all. Old junk shop was not reared in the 1700s or the 1840s. So don't you fucking tell me misogyny is not alive and well within the church. Because that's a badass story. Even if she was evil in the sight of the Lord. She did massacre all of the king's sons, took over the kingdom, ruled with a reign of terror for 7 years that was only broken when Jehoiada the priest decided that this baby that had been placed in his care as an infant was old enough at the age of 7 to reign over Israel, mounted a coup, I say, crowned this 7-year-old brat king of Israel, drave Athaliah, was that her name? I don't want to fuck it up now that I made such a big deal. Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, drave her out from the temple and slew her in the street like a dog. This is the simplified plot of a fucking sword and sandal action epic from the 1960s. How has this never been done? You can see the font in your head. Athaliah, Queen of Israel. You just have to make up a whole bunch of shit to happen in the 7 intervening years, which Lord knows Hollywood is totally incapable of doing. All right. You know shit's about to get real when a woman has a name in this fucking book. Because women don't count, remember. The women don't count and the women don't matter. Unless they do something really awesome really treasonous or absolutely fucking badass. And I'm sorry, I feel sorry for the kids that she slew in order to take over the kingdom. But if the men get to do it like Mr. Jehu did in the last chapter, the women can do it too. I know that's a fucked up way to announce a preference for equality in literature, but for heaven's sake, if we can have a King Herod, we can have a Queen Athaliah. Athaliah, Queen of Israel. I got entirely too excited about that. Let me check on the chat, see what's been going on whilst I've been ranting. I see Santy the Sane done joined us. What chapter? Chapter 11. 2 Kings 11. Alrighty. Oh, Paul dropping the link to the article about... Yeah, thank you for that. I will definitely go back and check on that after the... Nerdy Rodent says his hunger for smiting is still unsatisfied. You bloodthirsty little rodent, you. You're as eager for the smiting as Mr. Shadow Kitty was for those fucking bears. Joan says it makes her think of the stream on Critical Cripples channel this day. Athaliah has her price to kill. Yes. And it's a kingdom. Yeah, that one little bothersome prince getting away. See, that's the lesson. If you're gonna mount a coup and kill all the babbies, make sure you kill all the babbies. Wouldn't have that bothersome New Testament if old King Herod had learned from the story of old Queen Athaliah. Make sure you gotta catch them all. All right. Well, that was one of those lot of action in a short space of time kind of chapters. Oh, Paul sent pictures of the pub and it's that's fucking fantastic.
I'm ridiculously jealous.
I bet the light in there is glorious, isn't it? I mean, look at those windows. Holy shit. Thank you, Paul. That's amazing. My heart is lighter for having seen those pictures. Yeah. So 7-8 years, give or take, gone by in the space of that one chapter. The previous chapter covered a matter of days. And in this one, I'm sorry, my mind is blown. There was a queen of Israel. Who the fucking... I didn't know that. And I was raised by a biblical scholar, y'all. I'm ticked off. The genocidal queen of Israel, Athaliah. What a fantastic name for a murderous coup-mounting queen. I'm going to name one of my queen alien figurines Athaliah. Don't look at me like that. We met. You know what a giant dork I am. Queen of Israel. I'm sorry, y'all. I know I'm stuck, but I'm stuck. My mind, it is blown. It is. I'm gonna have to move on to chapter 12. I want this movie. Athaliah, Queen of Israel. Banned in 25 countries. Like Faces of Death. I'm already casting it in my head, trying to figure out who I want to do all those glorious practical effects that we're going to need to massacre all those babbies. Tom Savini's getting up there, but he's still doing work. Wonder who does Takashi Miika's gore effects. My. All right. Maya has found us. Welcome, Maya. Yeah, Joan, that's a great point. It doesn't even say that she was a bad queen, aside from the, the whole murdering her way to the top. Did it? Hang on. Just one heckin' moment. What gods did she worship? Well, she didn't tear down the house of the Lord. She didn't disappoint. She didn't de-appoint Jehoiada, the priest of the Lord. This, they would have said. If this was a queen that led Israel astray, because that's been the thing. That was Jezebel's big fuck up, is she set up Asherah poles. She worshipped foreign fertility goddesses. If Athaliah had worshipped foreign gods, this book would have said. And that would have been presented as justification for installing a 7-year-old in her stead and for slaying her in the street like a dog. This, whoops, finally lost that last light bulb in the ceiling fixture. Thank goodness for my old light. Thank you, Wonder Lady Faye, for the suggestion of this marvelous light that keeps us from being as in the dark as I apparently was about this chapter until just today. How's that for a metaphor caught out of the air on the fly? If she had led the people of Israel into the service of other gods during her 7-year reign, this book would have fucking said it. This was a righteous, Yahweh-worshiping queen over Israel, who, yes, murdered her way to the top, but that's been done before. Athaliah reigned in righteousness over Israel for 7 years until Jehoiada the priest had had enough of being bossed around by a woman, engineered her murder, and installed a 7-year-old boy in her place. Where is this movie? How has this not been done? I want to read the biblical scholarship on this story. Like the series, not the pop apologetics. I want to read the serious, because you know it's been done. Buried somewhere in the vaults at Cambridge or Yale or Wesleyan Theological Seminary or Asbury or somewhere there are papers about this chapter and this chapter alone. And I must read them. Because this is fucking fascinating. I'm sorry, if you don't find it fascinating, I'm sorry, but you had to see this coming when we hit this story. As soon as we got into it, you had to see this coming. Me. Have we met? Hi, I'm Junk Shop. I get bent out of shape over weird feminist issues in the Bible. There was a Yahweh-worshiping queen who ruled over Israel 7 years and was cooed out by a priest who'd had enough of her and installed a 7-year-old in her stead. This is the most amazing story in this book so far. This is mind-blowing. And I'm not going to say my mind is blown again. Okay. And on that note, we're going to roll out of here because my amazing producer, MathPig, has his own stream on. I did not get my advance notifications for anybody today. So we're going to kill it here. And until we meet again, everybody, let me throw these on just in case. Everybody take care, be safe, stand against hate. And we will see you same time on Wednesday, Gremlins of Technology willing. I stole that from the TransGarter channel, just in the interest of full disclosure. All right. Mr. MathPig, you can kill the stream anytime. Thank you again so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, MathPig, for your assistance. Blessings and moon pies.